Thank you for joining us today. We're here, Dr. Mary Lee, live with the legendary, prominent, intelligent, intellectual, and profoundly Jesus-loving black man, Dr. Cornel West. I am so happy you're here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and I salute you, my dear sister, Dr. Mary Lee. Indeed, indeed, a combination of nobility, grace, vision, courage, and style.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to welcome Dr. Tatum, our co-host, Michael as well. Go ahead, Dr. Tatum, say a word or two.
Well, all I can tell you, we must be ready to go to heaven because we got Dr. West, and he's doing some great things. So I'm looking outside for the rapture. God bless.
Yes, thank you. He's always doing great things. I've admired you for so very long, and I'm just grateful to have this opportunity to just sit here and chat. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone else joining us right now. To reiterate what Dr. Tatum said, I as well am very grateful for Dr. West joining us and, bringing his experience and hopefully coming to enlighten us and, provide some insight. So thank you again to Dr. West and to Dr. Lee for allowing this platform to exist so we can have conversations like this.
Thank you. First, I'd like to congratulate you, Dr. West, on your decision to go back to intellectual freedom, to go back to the Union Theological Seminary. I mean, how can we do this today without talking about it? I think I respect your decision, however way you decided to go, but I really do respect this decision, and I want to congratulate you on it.
Thank you so very much for that. Thank you. But I want to salute Brother Tatum. No, he's just such a major force for real good, not just on the West Coast, but in the country and in the world. And when he calls, he knows I come running. He knows things can get crazy with me, but his heart is golden and his mind is sharp. And to have you all together is a blessing.
Thank you.
I appreciate your prayers, though, because that's really what the decision was about. Somewhere I read, seek ye first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added unto you. You got to be true to your calling, true to your vocation. Brother
Absolutely.
Michael, saluting you, younger generation, brother. Younger generation. That's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And what you're seeking and what you feel and what we all agree with is that the university, and not just university, anywhere where you're employed or provide the type of services that you provide and what you bring to them, there shouldn't be any question about intellectual freedom. Can you expand a little bit about, for people who are listening today, what do you mean by intellectual freedom?
Yes, I appreciate that wonderful question. I mean very much what the Negro National Anthem, what the anthem of a great black people is, which is lift every voice. It doesn't say lift every echo. It doesn't say lift an extension of an echo chamber. It doesn't say lift every imitation and emulation, because a voice is original.
Yes.
There's a difference between a voice and an echo. And when we lift our voices, just like a jazz orchestra, you got to find your voice. And when you lift your voice, it's got to be free.
Yes.
It's got to be tied to something deep in your soul. So a university ought to be like a jazz orchestra, all these different voices bouncing up against one another in order to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
Make the world a better place. And when there's any attempt to circumscribe or to dampen the fire that goes into the lifting of a voice, it's time to go. It's time to go.
And we appreciate that. I'm going to ask Michael if you would. I'm certain that you're full of questions right now, and that's what we're here for, to just chat.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Dr. West. If you didn't mind, I had a question about further clarification. You mentioned really implicitly, I think, a lack of freedom that you feel. Could you go into some specifics as to, what this is to politics, if there's a political side to it, or you felt you fit in some way?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that too, my brother. And it's true that most of the structures in America, because we live in such a white supremacist soaked culture and civilization, most structures are going to be very difficult for black folk who are self-loving and self-respecting in order to raise their voices in a full-fledged way. So that on the one hand, you always want to be in a place where you're respecting yourself, where you can in some sense raise your voice, but you've got to also draw some lines in the sand. And when you feel as if your voice is being diminished, or you're being disrespected, devalued, or dismissed, then you got to look for some alternatives, you see. So that more specifically, it has to do with various political issues in terms of connecting the Black Lives Matter movement to what's going on around the world, what's going on with U.S. militarism in Africa, what's going on to various militaristic policies in Latin America, what's going on in the Middle East with Palestinian brothers and sisters, Kashmir, another ugly occupation. Same is true with what's going on with our Muslim brothers in China, brothers and sisters in China. Any form of domination or suppression, one needs to raise one's voice, because I believe in being consistent. You know what I mean? I went to Shiloh
Right.
Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, and we learned Jesus loved the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in his sight. That means that a baby in Africa, Europe, Asia, Latin America, or Bakersfield, California, all those babies have the same value in the eyes of God. And therefore, you're going to raise your voice. And that's really what it is to seek truth. See, the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. Everybody's suffering, you see. And when you highlight everybody's suffering, there's a good chance you're going to get in trouble. What Brother John Lewis called what? Good
Trouble.
trouble. See, we come from a people, remember that spiritual says, wade in the water, God gonna trouble the water. You see it in the book of Nahum, that minor prophet. Well, God has God's way in the whirlwind and the storm. You encounter God in the whirlwind, in the storm. Marcus Garvey used to say, when I come back to see how black folk are doing, find me in the whirlwind. He was biblical. He was a Christian too. People don't talk about the Christian faith of Marcus Garvey from Jamaica too much, but he was deeply shaped by a Christian sensibility. As his parents, who were Methodists, he ended up actually Roman Catholic, but he always had that Christian sense of the centrality of the cross, the centrality of loving folk who the world doesn't love, and the centrality of acting courageously against the grain in the world, but not of the world, you see. And so, be it in Harvard, but not of Harvard, having to do with all of those different issues, drones, poverty, militarism, all of those issues, white supremacy. When you raise those issues in a very strong way, there's a good chance you're going to get in trouble.
So let me ask you more directly then,
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
West.
Mm-hmm.
It's a position that I personally take, and I want to see if maybe you're in alignment with it. I personally think that now, especially, is the time, after what we've seen with the last administration, for black people, Africans globally, to be the orchestrators and directors of their own agenda and to speak for themselves really as much as possible exclusively. That doesn't mean to exclude other opinions or to be insular necessarily, but would you agree with the notion that, globally Africans should be the ones leading their agenda and less reliant on, for instance, typically democratic officials that come from outside of our community? Would you agree with that it's time for us to be the directors of our own destiny across the globe?
My dear brother, I wholeheartedly agree that we must lead, we must be in the vanguard, and on a deep level, we must define our reality. We can't allow others
Absolutely.
to define the reality for us. That's what it means to be self-determining, both in the life of the mind as well as in our larger lives. Now, we're still going to have to end up uh, uh, wrestling with, working with, and being in solidarity with others outside of the black community because we all are living in a larger social unit. But we've
Right.
got to begin on the chocolate side of town.
And
And we have
as
to begin with our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, our cousins, and so forth, and then bring it to bear for the rest of society and the world. Absolutely. I'm
speaking
sorry to
on
interrupt.
leadership, I just like to interject here. As we talk about leadership in the black community, what would you define as a sufficient black leader, or as a sufficient black leadership?
Mm, wonderful question. Well, I'm old school about this. That I like to go back to our history. You all remember that wonderful metaphor of Sankofa, that our black nationalist brothers and sisters, it's like a reptile biting its tail. You refuse to move forward until you have connected with the best of your past. So when I think of leadership, I think of Harriet Tubman. Now, what was it about Harriet Tubman? Go down there 19 times and probably more in the belly
Hmm.
of the beast of white supremacist barbarism called slavery. What led her? Because she loved black people. That's the benchmark of any serious, genuine black leadership. You got to be willing to love. Now, what is it about love? It means you're willing to get people to see things they didn't see before. That's what love does. So when you love folks, you start seeing things you start feeling things you didn't feel before. And you're willing to act courageously. So when you love black people, you hate the fact that they're being treated unfairly. You got to do something about it. You loathe the fact they've been treated unjustly. And if you don't do something about it, the rocks are going to cry out. So that what brings together Harriet Tubman, Martin King, A. Philip Randolph, all those leaders, is that they had a deep love. And love consists of protecting the people, respecting the people, and correcting the people. All three, just like our parents who loved us, they protected us, they respected us, and they corrected us. At least that's my mom and daddy did
That
for
was
me.
mine too.
Oh, I knew I
Absolutely.
knew it was love now, but sometimes it hurt.
It
That
didn't
third
feel
one hurt
like it.
sometimes. That's
If
right. But
if I
but
if
we
I could,
knew it was motivated by a caring for us, a concern for us. So they did protect us. They did
Yes.
respect us. They wanted us to grow into our own selves, but they also corrected us, you see. And we need a leadership that loves the people enough to get them to see things they're not seeing, feel things they're not feeling, and then to act courageously. So you exemplify the love. And as you get older, you say, Lord, I see why Dad was doing what he was doing now. I understand what Mom was doing with show. I understand Grandma now, even when she got the switch. Now, I'm not arguing necessarily we ought to be using the switch, but my grandmama used some switch on me. But that was her way at that time of getting me to see some things that I shouldn't have been seeing and doing so that I would end up being a stronger person in the world, tied to truth, beauty, and goodness. See, that's T. Rose out of Jim Crow, Texas. I'm talking about my grandmama. See, but I knew the love
Hmm.
was there. The love was there, and the problem is we just don't have enough black leaders on the local level, on the state level, on the regional level, on the national and global level, who have that kind of love.
Hmm.
Too many are in it for the wrong reasons. They're in it for status. They in it for their own personal power. They in it for their own individual agenda. Where's the love of the people? That's the challenge. Now, I'm not saying we don't have any, but we need more. We must have
Absolutely.
more.
if I could interject here, Dr. West, would you say that an expression of this love you just mentioned could be something like an entrepreneurial independent spirit? So let's say a leader, a black leader, who promotes the black community monopolizing as much as possible the control of the black community. So owning as much of our own economy as possible, controlling as much of our own politics as possible. Would you say that could be an expression of love and independent entrepreneurial spirit exemplified by a black
Certainly,
leader?
that would be a feature. There's no doubt. But even when you do that, my dear brother, you still want the people in the community to be those who you are of service to. You see what I mean?
Right.
Because you can be too narrowly selfish and still be concerned with just the black market. Or you can be concerned with serving black people in which you only have your black market as the basis of your business, you see. And so in the end, it's going to be a moral and a spiritual criteria. It's not just going to be about geography. It's just not going to be about the market that you're concerned about. It's a moral and a spiritual criteria, you see. When we see it in black churches, Brother Tatum can lay out a whole analysis, right? In black churches, all black, you got pastors who have a deep, genuine love of the people, the way my pastor did, Reverend Willie P. Cook at Shiloh Baptist Church. But we can go right around the corner, right there in Oak Park, and you got another black pastor who he's concerned about his cars, he's concerned about his house and his mansion and his status. And you say, wait. We got to juxtapose that with Reverend Willie P. Cook. You got to juxtapose that with J. Alfred Smith in Oakland. You see what I mean? You got to juxtapose that with Amos Brown in San Francisco. You got examples of folk who are giving over a long period of time. And that's and one of the reasons when we talk with Brother Tatum, you see, he's able to bring to bear this rich legacy of love right there in Bakersfield and say, we're going to keep this tradition alive. And that's one of the things that me and Brother Tatum talk about all the time. Isn't that right, my brother?
That's right, Doc. Let me say this real quick, Dr. Lee. Dr. Cornel West put together a song on Hidden Beach Records, 2007. It's called America. It deals with the 400 years plight of African Americans in this nation. I recommend everyone that's watching, listen to it. Go get that song. It pretty much it's resonating. It's going to be a national song, equivalent to Change with my brother Sam Cooke. America, a Journey, 2007. But I want to say this. This is my question to you, Dr. West. Post January 6th, at the nation's capital, the nation is in a great divide. The divisiveness between color, racism has come to the surface. We have vaccines for COVID-19 variants are surfacing. What would you prescribe, Dr. West, post January 6, 2021, what vaccine would you prescribe for this present divide and pandemic of racism?
Well, we're going to need an anti-racist vaccine. We need a vaccine against white supremacy. We need a vaccine against all of this hatred of black people. We need a vaccine against all this contempt for black people. And I think one of the ways you do that is you got to make sure that the doctors who are providing the vaccine have a deep care, concern, and love for black people themselves. What we saw January 6th were some white brothers and sisters who were dead up gangsters full of hatred, much of it against black people, with Confederacy flags being shown in the Capitol for the first time in the history of the country. And that's just the peak of the iceberg. That's what fascism is. It is the hatred of those peoples who are most vulnerable in a society. You see, and so they also had a hatred of brown folk. They had Jewish folk. Camp Auschwitz. Can you imagine that? Camp Auschwitz. Millions of Jewish brothers and sisters were killed, and they say it wasn't enough. 6 million was not enough. See, that's a level of hatred that is hard to understand. They had the noose hanging up there. You think of all the precious black brothers and sisters who've been lynched, and they got the nerve to use that as a symbol, as a catalyst for their attempt to storm the Capitol, you see. Now we have to keep in mind that, when you see that, you don't use that as a point of reference. Our point of reference is our own tradition, is our own community. We have to get fortified in order to resist, fight, in order to move and keep moving. So we don't get obsessed with somebody else's movement. You see, because our movement is not just over against, it's for something. The only reason we're fighting against racism because we love black people. It's not just anti-racist.
Now,
It's positive. It's for something that goes beyond just what you're over against.
yeah, many black people feel are refusing to take the COVID-19 immunization because they feel that there's a hidden black agenda in this. So, what do you feel about that? Do you feel there's a hidden black agenda? I mean, are they trying to put get rid of us? Or what is it all about with this RMA and this DNA and this thing that's going to go into every single cell in our bodies? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, thank you. We see our dear brother Cannon here. We got
Yes,
another
sir.
love warrior and freedom fighter in the house.
Yes.
Sister Dr. Lee, brother Michael, brother Tatum. Well, I resonate with a certain suspicion that black people have because black people, we're not stupid. We got a long history of the medical industry and the medical profession doing things to us that violated our dignity and violated our humanity. At the same time, we can't be suspicious of medicine across the board because medicine can be a force for good. There's just no doubt about that. I mean, I had cancer. If I didn't go in there with the cancer, for them to get the cancer out, I would have been long gone, long time ago. In fact, the doctors only gave me 2 months anyway, but I serve a mighty God. So that's a whole different
Amen.
thing.
Yes.
So that what I think is important for precious black folk is for anytime one talks about it, I had to be the first one in line. You see, so I tell black folk, I tell you what, I'm gonna get in line and I'm gonna take the vaccine and I'm gonna give you a report on how I'm doing. So you don't have to be the first one in line because black folk got a suspicion of the vaccine. So I got my vaccine about 5 days ago, had my little chills and things, and was wondering what was going on. But now I'm strong as ever. So that anytime I come to black folk about taking it, I say, now, I already took it. So I'm already tested. You check it out because I've already checked it out. And it is working, which means that the possibility of that virus going at me and undermining my health and so forth, it's already working. And I've known a number of people as well who took it even earlier than me who was working. That's the kind of message we take to the black community. So you don't ignore the concerns that black people have about the medical industry. We got the Tuskegee experiment. We got medical apartheid. All that's been working for a long time. But you have to address people's suspicions by example.
I
And
think
so
if
far,
I
I'm going to give
may,
an example.
if I may add, I think it's an important point of clarification to posit to the conversation that most black people, when you survey them, they're certainly not distrustful of the scientific methodology surrounding vaccination, considering, you have Onesimus, who was an enslaved West African individual who actually educated a lot of Europeans in Boston in colonial times on how to perform viral inoculation and help mitigate the spread of smallpox. So,
That's right.
certainly the concept of vaccination and viral inoculation has been with us for quite some time. I think, and you would agree with this, most people on the panel would, African Americans are more so distrustful of who's administering the vaccine based on, like you said, Dr. West,
Absolutely.
their history, not necessarily
That's
the
right.
scientific methodology. So that's an important
That's a
point to
very
mention.
important distinction. I'm so glad you made that distinction, my brother. You made it brilliantly and clearly, too. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Dr. Cannon?
Yes, sir, to the team. Listen, this is a powerful conversation. Doctor, we appreciate everybody. Dr. West, we definitely appreciate you, sir. My question is more directly out of history. When we look at the Tuskegee experiment and we look at what happened with that many years ago, and then we look at the fact that Booker T. Washington, even though we love him tremendously, from his institution, that experiment took place, and then his death, mysteriously, the way he died, there was real no answers. And some say he might have even went insane, which might have been a symptom of syphilis. So the question was, the money that came for that experiment came from his institution. From your understanding with his death, did that have any correlation with syphilis, or was he a part of that experiment in the way he died mysteriously like that? And then with that experiment coming from his institution, sir, the question would be, from your history, his death, was that a correlation with that experiment coming from Tuskegee?
Oh, yeah, appreciate that question, my brother. I mean, the books that I have read on Booker T. Washington, and of course, there's a number of scholarly treatments of him, that I haven't seen any that has made an argument based on the evidence that there was a direct connection. But you just never know. You really don't know. Black leaders have been under tremendous character assassination and literal assassination all the time, all the time. And so I always leave it open. But so far, I haven't been able to see any text that make that kind of argument. He died in 1915, right?
Yes.
He died in 1950. Marcus Garvey was on his way trying to meet Booker T. Washington before he died. Marcus didn't get here until March 1916, so he just missed Booker T. Washington. But I wouldn't put closure on that, though, brother. I just don't know. But we haven't seen evidence as of yet. We haven't seen it as of yet. But you think about so many black leaders, you know, I mean, good God, who really killed Martin Luther King Jr.? We know it wasn't just one person. You had all kind of cooperation going on. Who really was behind the killing of Malcolm X? It wasn't just the black Muslim brothers who did it. The FBI knew what was going on. COINTELPRO was in place, and so forth and so on, you see.
I can't remember the name of the police officer. I think he passed away, and some revelations about his deathbed confessions have recently come out. I can't remember his name, but I know there's a police officer who made some allegations that a black police officer, that he was working with the FBI to set up those Muslim individuals in the assassination of Malcolm X. I know it just recently came out and it was over the news, but I can't remember his name. But if I
can't remember the name, but I know what you're talking about. That's very important.
I don't know how much time we have, and if it's not enough, Dr. Lee can cut me off.
No, we'll go as long as the spirit wants us to go. I mean, I got a 4:00 show, but
no, go ahead. No, fine, go ahead.
It's 4:00, all right?
Okay. Absolutely. Excellent. Continue on, Michael. Go ahead. That's fine.
Because I wanted to ask Dr. West a question in connection with something that Dr. Tatum brought up that was really excellent, in my opinion, which was the destruction that happened January 6th. Something that I see kind of omitted, or I guess missing from the conversations in this country that happen on a large scale, like in media, about race, is how much race is actually, in the minds of, you know, the people we consider white supremacists, how much race is actually more important than class issues. This is often something that I see white leftists, like Democrats, socialists, social democrats, whatever you want to call them, either fail to mention out of ignorance or fail to mention, you know, maybe out of embarrassment, the fact that there are, unfortunately, a greater percentage of white supremacists are more willing to die to preserve white ethnocracy and to forestall racial meritocracy than they are to, you know, tax the ultra wealthy like Jeff Bezos and get people free health care. Do you find that to be a point of contention between you and the white leftists you work with? Sometimes maybe their reluctancy to mention how much people who are white supremacists are actually willing to die for their racism.
No, that has been one of the fundamental challenges of any multiracial progressive movement, my brother. That you can get, you can get somebody like Brother Bernie Sanders who's willing to confront Wall Street, willing to confront the 1%. But Brother Bernie got a whole lot of vanilla cousins who don't follow him, who could end up even with Trump and company, you see. So that I'm committed to multiracial solidarity based on a commitment to the least of these, which is to say based on a commitment to poor people and working people. But a leftist of whatever color has to come to terms with the fact that the racism in the white working class, that the white supremacy in the white working class, right, cuts very deep, and you have to fight it. And it has been a major obstacle for any attempt to focus on those you were talking about, the 1%, right, the billionaire class, the ruling class, ultra the power wealthy, elites. Yeah. Absolutely. You're absolutely
and I know it goes
right.
into, I'm sure you're aware of, W.E.B. Du Bois' Wage of Whiteness, how important he spoke about whiteness was to even poor whites, how much they were willing to knowingly suffer their own well-being to prevent racial meritocracy. So let me ask you, are you familiar at all, or have you come across the work of more recent, I think he's a doctor of sociology at the University, Vanderbilt University. Are you familiar with Dr. Jonathan Metzl? He wrote a very famous book, Dying of Whiteness, where he actually goes into the South, and he's been going into the South for some years, and he documents how when he was talking to the most ill people, the most at-need people who were voting against policies that they knew would help them, and he asked them why they were doing it, that they frequently said that despite the fact they knew it was going to help them, they were doing it because they didn't want to allow for racial meritocracy, that even though it may have hurt them, they still knew it would hurt other people, black people and brown people, and that was worth more to them. Are you aware of his work, Dr. Jonathan Metzl?
I know of that text, my dear brother, but as I recall, it was a full-fledged confirmation of Du Bois's thesis of the wages of whiteness in a contemporary mode. And yet, we can't be discouraged in terms of thinking that those voices speak for every particular white person. There's always been a group of white brothers and sisters to fight against white supremacy. Not a big one, but enough to create a kind of alliance with black freedom fighters who are trying to bring critique to bear on that 1% that you were talking about. And that's important to keep in mind. Because see, the thing, as I said before, you see, we can't allow our foes to set the points of reference for us in terms of how we think and how we act, or you end up just reacting all the time. We have to use our own tradition as a point of reference for a possibility of being resilient and the possibility of engaging in resistance. But we can't be naive. The wages of whiteness that Du Bois talked about, the empirical investigation that the brother in Vanderbilt talked about that you just noted, those are very important obstacles and impediments that we have to be cognizant of. We have to know that it's there, but we still have to use our own determination and fortitude in order to push it back over and over again.
And one of the things, and sorry, I don't want to talk for too long. I'll let someone else jump in here. But one of the things that I want to follow up on with the comments you just made, because I agree with everything you said, is I think one thing we have to acknowledge, especially when we're talking about class issues, is I think the power of racism. For instance, some people, usually some white leftists who may take intention with what I'm saying, might respond to it and say, well, the percentage of the population that behave in this way are a statistical minority of the total population. And even if that's true, I think people should know that that doesn't necessarily diminish the impact, because, for instance, you take California and Wyoming. California and Wyoming have the same amount of senators, but as you know, because of the electoral system, California has more population, but that gives the electorate in Wyoming a disproportionate influence on politics, and usually states that have less population are less diverse, so that ends up actually amplifying some political predispositions and preferences of that minority that we say is a minority and is less powerful because of that, the racist minority. But in reality, I think we should mention that electorally, minorities can still exert disproportionate influences, even if they don't, even if they're not the majority.
You are absolutely right, though, brother. I tell you, it's the joy in being in dialogue with you because you teaching all of us. You teaching all of us, though, brother. And keep in mind now, there's no doubt that Trump was a neo-fascist gangster. He showed that for 4 years. But 58% of white brothers voted for him anyway. 58%. 53% of the white sisters voted for him anyway. So that when they come back to you and say, well, it's just a small statistical, no. It's a majority. If it wasn't for the black voters, especially the black sisters' votes, Trump would still be in there. The fascists would be running things. American democracy would be completely over, off the cliff. So black folk, again, come back and rescue American democracy. We did it with 200,000 soldiers in the Civil War. The Confederacy looked like they were winning. Here come 200,000 black brothers in the war, break the back of the Confederate Army. 1960s, we did it. America's about to go off the cliff. Here come Martin Luther King Jr. Here come Fannie Lou Hamer. Here come Ella Baker. Here come Diane Nash. Here comes James Lawson. Here comes Stokely Carmichael. What do? They create a possibility for America not to go off the cliff by creating voting rights, civil rights, multiracial democracy. That was 1960s. Now, 60 years later, America's about to go off the cliff again. If it wasn't for the black sisters in Georgia, with fair fight with Sister Stacey Abrams and the other, with the two senators, the black brother and the Jewish brother.
Yeah.
The Senate would have gone Republican, right? So we see examples of intervening, but in the end, it still doesn't get at the deeper structural issues of wealth inequality, poverty, and what have you. Now, I'm glad to see this relief bill go through because this relief bill is going to hit child poverty in a serious way. I'm very happy about that. They said it's going to cut it 50%. And I think poverty among children is a crime against humanity. We ought to abolish it. We shouldn't just be celebrating 50%. We want 100%. But we got 50. Okay, fine. We just keep pushing. You see what I mean? But this issue of the role of black people in our freedom struggle as the leaven in the American loaf. The loaf doesn't expand if the leaven is not right. When we putting the pressure on, American democracy expands. When American democracy is about to go under, if we don't intervene, it's over. Because racism is the one explosive issue that could ring down the curtain on America. And we've seen it go to the edge over and over again. The sad thing is that even when black people rescue American democracy, black poor people and black working people too often get re-crucified.
And Dr.
So right
Dr.
when we
West,
do it, then they turn their backs to us. The election is over, they turn their backs to us.
Right.
Too often.
If I could say one more thing, and then I'll let I know I've been talking a lot. I'll let Dr. Tatum and Mary Lee and James Cannon jump in if they want to.
Wonderful question. Wonderful question.
Yeah, I just want to say that what you said, Dr. West, is very powerful and informative. I didn't know what you mentioned about the 200,000 African American soldiers fighting in the Civil War, turning the tide. I actually didn't know that, so I appreciate that information. I think what you're saying is just reiterating a point that you mentioned earlier, which is the necessity of black people dictating their own destiny and framing their own situation in accordance with their own perception. Because the way you put it, and realistically the way it is, not just here but across the world, it seems like African peoples kind of have to step up to be the next leaders in America and across the world because of, in America at least, the perception, the perspicacious kind of perception that African Americans have had, that they've been able to see things even when other white people in power haven't been able to see things. And like you said, rescue democracy countless times. So what you mentioned is, I think, a great support for your earlier position of the importance of us dictating our own destiny and creating our own framing of things, because we do have to step up and be leaders, not just for ourselves, but for other communities as well.
Absolutely. And it's another
Yeah.
way of saying, my dear brother, that we have got to be like the black artists. You see, when people think of America and they think of music, who do they think of? Black musicians. When people think of America in terms of athletes, who do they think of? Black athlete. The athlete is an artist. Now, people try to reduce them, but you can't be no LeBron James without unbelievable discipline, talent. You do something that only one person in the whole world can do. Because Michael Jordan retired. You know what I mean? So that this is artistry. They're not just money makers and so forth. These are the structures of fairness. When they're available to black people, we take it to the height. Basketball court. Same is true in the boxing ring with Muhammad Ali. You got a space of fairness, and every other space in your society is unfair. But put the black man in there, when it's fair, he gonna knock some folk out. I mean, I know that's violent thing, but it's Jack Johnson all the way to Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Robinson. But see, we got to do that as leaders. We got to do that as ministers, not knocking folk out. We have to be the same vanguard. Young people the same way, right? We learn from our musicians. We learn from our athletes. They are the best. They represent the best in the whole country and the world. Well, we learn from them. We're inspired by them. And that's where you get your Martin Kings and Malcolm X's and others, because they aspire to that same level of genius and excellence that they saw in the musicians. They saw it in Duke Ellington. They saw it in Sarah Vaughan. You see what I mean? They saw it in Mary Lou Williams. Ooh, they saw it in Count Basie. Everybody know who the greatest and the coolest and the most soulful are. There ain't no argument about that. They also saw it in boxing. They saw it in basketball. They saw it in Jim Brown on the football. They saw it in Althea Gibson playing tennis. Just give us a chance, and you watch us go to the top. But that's a calling. That is a calling, my brother.
It's a calling.
Ain't no career.
It's a calling.
You got to be called. You got to be real about that. You got to seek ye first the kingdom, and other things gonna be added to you. You see.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tatum. I think you were trying to jump in here. We've got only 5 minutes left here, and I do have a quick.
15. We can take 15 if you want. We can take 15 if you like now, Dr. Mary Lee.
Well, we get it. If we get our engineers to extend us, we'll see.
I don't want to mess with.
All right, let me ask this question right quick.
Okay, question. Okay, Dr. Tatum. Okay, Dr. Tatum.
Okay, Dr. West. We have been working together, me, Dr. Cannon, Nick Cannon, ambassador of HR 1242, which is now Bill 115. 102 that was signed by 115 Congress in 2018, which is allowing African Americans to tell their stories from 1619 till 2019. They've been extended till June of 2021. So me and Dr. Cannon are working on Operation 1 Billion. And this allows us to educate African people of color, as well as people that are not of color, about our plight, our stories, through films, through movies, through our history, through music, all the things you mentioned. In light of lost cause that the Daughters of the Confederate brought in indoctrinating the schools of the South about winning the war, and that it was about black slaves being happy, being docile, and also erecting all these different monuments. How important is having a bill like this in raising the billion we're trying to educate America about our history, to dismantle all the lost cause efforts that was planted throughout the century?
Oh, I think what you're doing is monumental and magnificent. It is indispensable. It is crucial. I was just with my sister who's in the assembly from Los Angeles. Y'all remember her name? I forget
her. About the great Maxine?
No, in the State House. The one in the State House.
Oh, the state. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think I know
she used to work with Maulana Karenga. but because she
Okay.
pushed through this bill in terms of the study, make sure that they have black studies all across the country. I'm all across the state of California. So just that kind of exposure to black history, and then the connection of that study to struggle, to collective struggle. So I salute what you all are doing. It is very, very important indeed.
Dr. Cannon.
Yes, sir. Beautiful. Just out of respect of time, so I have a question I'd like to be able to follow back up on it. On the 14th Amendment, the last verse says, and or claims for the loss of emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. That's in the fifth stanza of the 14th Amendment. It says that if we bring any claim against the United States for reparations or emancipation, it is illegal and void. Do you read that same way, sir?
Well, no, I think we've got some legal minds, black legal minds, that can read that in such a way that we must continue our movement for reparations. It's not only legal, but it's moral. It's not only moral, but it's just. It's not only just, but it is ethical. Ethical.
But if they
And
throw
so
that, but
I
if they
think we
throw
can
that,
still make a strong case for reparations, whatever those particular words that you're reading say.
but if
I'm,
they snuck that in there in secret and saying that it's illegal and void, and that's in the Constitution in that fifth stanza, to even bring a case against the United States, then they'll throw that at us at the last moment and discombobulate all of our efforts. If we got to attack that first,
unfortunately,
if they
thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, we've
No,
got
I hear what you're
only
saying.
one more
But if
minute
one vote
left here in the studio.
is strong enough, we can overcome some of the little words, though, brother. You see what I'm saying?
yes,
We can
sir,
Okay.
overcome
yes,
some
sir.
because they're gonna use anything they can get, no matter which words and which part of the amendments. But that could be one that they use. But still, I'm not convinced that will in the end stand in the way of our reparations movement growing and growing and growing.
Dr. West, I certainly appreciate you. I have no control over the time here, but I
Oh,
just want to say that I appreciate you so very much. I want to thank you for your time. We've had a great conversation. My final question, and I know we don't have time, was Ice Cube's contract for Black America. Is that the answer?
no, that's not the answer. But you remember our anthem, "Lift Every Voice." So I believe the voice of Ice Cube is important. Lift every
Yes.
voice. Lift Brother Michael's voice, as brilliant as he is. Lift
Yes.
Brother Cannon's voice, as fortified and sharp as he is. Lift Brother Tatum's voice. Lift
Absolutely.
Dr. Mary Lee with all of that grace and nobility and spiritual content. And we lift all our voices. So I embrace my dear brother Ice Cube, Ice T, all of them. But some voices are going to surface to the top in a way that is different. I lift my voice, but I'm not Luther Vandross, so I got to find something else. I can't hit the microphone and sing. I'm going to write some books. I'm going to be involved in struggle on the ground. Everybody's lifting their voice in a different kind of way.
Yes, thank you so very much. And we're going to continue lifting our voices as much as we can. Thank you so much. I love you, mwah. Everybody.
Love you.
Thank you.
Is he here, kid?